Okay, news flash of the day regarding Genevieve Sabourin, Alec Baldwin, and Hilary Baldwin. Well, there are 3 appearances I'm aware of, court appearance, that Genevieve Sabourin made. One was the day after she was arrested in front of Alec's Greenwich Village unit. That was her arraignment. There's another hearing that I haven't been able to find out much about, and then there was a trial about a year and a half later on November 13th, 2013. So going back to 2012, all of her suitcases were in her car, so she apparently had just arrived from Hollywood and went to the Hampton address where she was shooed away by the police. I don't yet know what was said between the police and she, but I'm going to assume that they told her to stay away from Alec Baldwin, which means she was warned at that time to stay away from him, and therefore she knew he did not want to contact with her. But she may not have realized it was Alec who had told the police to get rid of her. She may have wanted to know who it was, because I think she suspected it was Hilary, since throughout her videos she seems to think Hilary was the one that was causing all of this police harassment. However, she's going to have a hard time explaining why she didn't get the clue, even though it was very cruel, very sudden, and really unforgivably rude on Alec's part, to be real sweet to her for 2 years, engage in phone sex with her for 2 years, exchange text messages, voicemails, and telephone calls for 2 years in what appears to be a relatively hot and heavy sexual relationship. Did not object when she said she was coming to New York, that she was going to change her place of business from Hollywood to New York. And there was good reason for that if she wanted to marry Alec, because he had said in a Howard Stern interview that the reason he divorced Kim Basinger was because she would not live in New York. She wanted to live in Hollywood or Los Angeles. So this was a very big issue with Alec, and as Genevieve was waking up to the fact that he was not kidding when he offered her $10 million, furs, jewelry, help with her a career, an apartment in New York, in exchange for her pretending to be the perfect wife so that he could, and have a lot of children, although he indicated he could not sire the children. He didn't say, I have had a vasectomy, but he said, I want a lot of children, and you have a couple of choices. You can get inseminated at a clinic, and have the children yourself, or you can use a surrogate and put on a phony belly, a phony prosthesis that makes it look like you're pregnant. But at any rate, I want a bunch of children because I want my image to change from Mr. Horrible to Prince Charming because of the mud that Kim Basinger had thrown at him during the divorce. And the telephone message that he had sent to his daughter calling her a selfish little pig that got broadcast to all the world. His business closed down to a halt after those revelations made during the Kim Basinger divorce of 2002. In 2010, Marty Bregman introduced Alec to Genevieve. And at that meeting, which Genevieve, looking back, says she now realizes was a job interview, would you like to be my sham wife? She thought it was a date, and that when he said, I'll give you all this stuff, this money, these jewels, these furs, all this support, if you will be my sham wife. I don't want any love. I don't want any sex. I just want the appearance of children and family so that I can start being perceived as a hero instead of a devil. She thought she was kidding. She thought he was kidding. And she thought that he was testing her to see if she was amenable to being bribed with his fabulous money, which was $60 million. And thinking that she was being tested, she turned him down and said, "No, I don't want your money. I only want your love." After which he had sex with her and commenced a 2-year relationship of text messages, emails, and telephone sex. So she thought she was making progress. And when he told her that he was dating Hilary, which I think he started dating Hilary in about a year after he met Genevieve, which would be February 2011, and about a year before he had Genevieve arrested in front of his Manhattan apartment in February of 2012. So during that 1-year period between February 2011 and February 2012, he started courting Hilary and did not make any sexual overture for, I believe, 2 months. Of course, he didn't need sex because he was getting it from Genevieve. But he didn't tell Hilary that. And what he told Genevieve, as I understand it, is that he thought he had found a contender to be his sham wife, which meant, I don't love her, I'm not having sex with her, it's me and you, baby, but I'm going to marry her maybe because I do want this pretense of a happy marriage and lots of children, and I'm working her up to it. And that's when Genevieve started realizing, oh my God, he was serious. I could have had $10 million for his jewelry and a career and a free apartment and a car. But it was a gradual awakening. And the more Alec pursued Hilary, the more Genevieve realized she and Alec were going nowhere with her hope that they would one day marry, because she was giving him sex. Apparently he didn't care about that. What he required for a marriage partner was somebody who would give the appearance of being happily married with a bunch of children, but not get him involved sexually or emotionally, because he could not risk a divorce. And he said that on the Howard Stern show also. He could not go through another divorce because of the financial repercussions. So a little side note here is that when he showed up on one of his dates with Genevieve, he had a contract. I think this was about a month after the first date. And he had a briefcase with him, and he opened up the briefcase at one point, and it had a contract in it, which she assumed was a prenup, and she was all fluttery, like, oh my God, he's going to ask me to marry him. But it turned out to be a different kind of a contract. It was a sham marriage contract, which she refused to sign, not knowing at that time, because she was only 30 and really wasn't that sophisticated yet, not knowing that these marriages do occur occasionally, more than just occasionally, in Hollywood, so that whoever, the homosexual guys, for instance, is very common that they'll get a wife that they don't want to have sex with, but they want the appearance of a happy marriage so that they can attract audiences and business. Well, that's what Alec wanted. But there's no evidence that he was homosexual, but it was the same kind of contract. And she was surprised, and she wasn't familiar with these contracts, so she turned him down. But as the telephone relationship progressed, she began to realize that he was not testing her. It was for real, and she would like to do it herself. Now that she realized it was really happening, she wanted to be the one. So the more intense the relationship, I don't know if intense is the right word, because apparently it was not a sexual relationship. But the closer Alec and Hilary got to solidifying the terms of the contract, and I still have no evidence that Hilary even knew about this. But Genevieve knew, because he had made the offer to her, and apparently talked to her quite at length during his courtship of Hilary. As Genevieve says, he would go out on dates with Hilary, going to these wonderful affairs, which was the reason for having this wife. He needed a woman that he could take around to all these affairs and introduce as his wife and produce all these children, and then he would be the ruling couple of Hollywood. Ken and Barbie that everybody else wanted to be. So the closer Hilary and Alec got to solidifying the terms of the contract, the more Genevieve woke up to the fact that the contract was real and that she better get her bid in. And I don't think, she hasn't yet said that she actually explicitly said to Alec, I'd like to put in my bid to be your sham wife, even though I turned you down a year ago. I don't think she was that explicit with him, but she did say, I'd like to change my center of gravity from Hollywood to New York. And he said, well, come on over, you can stay with me. So she packed up her suitcases and went to New York and went to Hampton, and the police shooed her away, from as far as I can see. She thought that Hilary was behind that. Then a couple of days later, Alec announced over the media that he was engaged to Hilary, which should have been her wake-up call. But it wasn't. She was in a state of confusion at that point. So she went to the Lincoln Center and got a front row seat, and Alec had her removed by the security guards. Now that certainly should have been noticed, that her advances were not wanted by Alec, even though he had told her that she could stay with him if she came to New York. So she wasn't quick enough on the draw to process this sudden, unexpected, and total rejection on the part of Alec, including police activity. She just wasn't sharp enough. She couldn't change her gears that fast. So after the security, she might have even wondered who called security. She just didn't know what was going on. So she went to his Manhattan apartment on Easter Sunday, a couple of days after she got removed by security at the Lincoln Center. And had the doorman announce her, and Alec was not there, but Hilary was, and Hilary told the doorman to stall her so they could have her arrested, and then the doorman called Alec, and he said, yeah, go ahead and arrest her. Remember, Alec, according to Martin Bregman, Alec was trying to hide from Hilary the fact that he had been having phone sex for 2 years with Genevieve. That's what Marty Bregman thought. Which means that Hilary may be entirely innocent of all of this except one thing. And that's the insane, bizarre emails that were offered into evidence and refused by the judge for lack of authenticity, that indicated that since about a month before Genevieve came to New York, she was sending these repulsive emails to Alec, which could be used. as evidence that he had every reason to be frightened when she showed up at his door unannounced, because they do appear to be the work of an obsessed woman. And I can't decide at this point whether Genevieve is telling the truth or not. But because if these emails are accurate, then Genevieve was truly obsessed, and Alec had every right to be frightened. However, they still didn't have the right to put her in jail for 7 months at Rikers Island, because those emails, if authentic, would have proved that she was delusionally insane and needed to be hospitalized. And if those emails are accurate and she was delusionally insane and needed to be hospitalized, then Alec had no right to be looking at her across the courtroom with contempt, which is what the newspaper said. Because he even though he's not very bright, you don't have to be more than average intelligence to know that if someone is delusionally insane, then you don't have contempt for them, you have pity for them, but he didn't. So that odd emotional reaction that he displayed on the witness stand has to be taken into consideration when you ask yourself whether he was in on the game with Hilary to torment Genevieve or not. Or maybe he's just such a slow, mean, disgusting human being that he has contempt for people who are insane and suffering from delusions. Maybe he's that kind of guy, that's walking the earth, not worthy of being among us, because we as a people since the time of Christ have had sympathy for people who are delusionally insane. But there are some who don't. Some people have contempt for the insane, and those people are considered low forms of life. So we know that he's either in on the game or he's a low form of life, because more than one news media describe his demeanor in the courtroom as contemptuous toward Genevieve. Now, I do not see any evidence of any wrongdoing on Genevieve's part between the time when they got a temporary restraining order on her the day after the arrest and a year and a half later when they got a permanent restraining order on her for 5 years and sentenced her to 7 months at Rikers Island. And generally speaking, you would not put someone in jail to punish them for wrongdoing, especially when you realize there was almost no real wrongdoing. But even assuming that she had been frightening and harassing Alec, she stopped. She wasn't, but had she been, then she would have stopped. There was no further harassment from the time the judge gave her a harassment order April the 9th, 2012, and November 13th, 2013. So why would the judge put her in jail? He had every reason to believe she could and would obey his order if he made it a permanent restraining order. That's very odd, in my opinion. I did get one shred of possibly evidence that the judge thought she was a bad person and should be put in jail, and that is that she was twittering about the situation and telling her side of the story after her arrest, describing how the cops mistreated her, which they did, how the system mistreated her, which it did, how frightened she was to lose her dog and have her car towed away, and all the things she went through, having been detained under the Terrorism Act because she was a foreigner, and Hilary had reported her to the police as harassing a big celebrity. And those two factors, the fact that she was harassing a major person, politician, superstar, plus being a foreigner, allowed the cops to detain her after 2001, 911, 2001, under the Terrorism Act. So she was arrested under that act, which was terrifying for her. And she told her side of the story on Twitter. And I think that the judge may have considered these tweets to be a breach of her order not to contact Alec or Hilary directly or indirectly, which in my opinion is a terrible infringement on her right to free speech, which includes her right to tell her side of the story. We may not have the right to slander other people, but we have always had the right and always should have the right to tell our story. This is what happened to me. This is how I perceived it. You always have the right to report on what's happening in your life from your point of view. So if that judge used her tweets against her as a reason to put her in jail for 7 months, we Americans have a huge problem that the First Amendment is being destroyed even after our forefathers, who worked so hard and gave their lives and their fortunes to carve out this right for us, which the English never had, the Europeans never had, and still don't to this day. The third world has never had it. They in the third world, you have to say what the king God tells you to say. So this is a very serious infringement of her right to free speech, and this is what I want to talk about in the future. Her right to free speech.